Islam, Morris. Islam. Islam, Morris. I am Menelik Allah Ar Rahim El Bay. We're gonna get in it. We're gonna get into it today, Morris. Let's listen to this good music, and then we're gonna get started. Whoo! Yeah, some of that Moorish music. That's right. To the plan, the Delta play see no more. You should learn to be a Moor. Let them have it. I wet ya. The scratcher. The TikTok shirts. The songs. Those are come. Come. Hey, Malik El Hodge. Rest in peace, soldier. Idiot boy. Islam, 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 Moors. I want to start off with the Asiatic Moorish American prayer. Allah is the Father of the universe. Allah is the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my God, my salvation, and my protection, by night and by day, through his illustrious holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali. Ameen and Islam, Moors. Yeah. Yeah, Moors, I'm back. Now, we're going to get down to this breakdown of the consensus, and it's about part 3 of the FBI files. So um, we're gonna get into it, and let's go ahead. Let's begin. Okay. Now, at the end of the Eisenhower administration, Reinhold Niebuhr, America's leading theologian, declared that the West had been successfully inculcated against communism by the historical dynamism of the Judeo-Christian tradition. The religious triumphalism concealed a more complex reality that would become apparent over the course of the 1960s. American policies and practices were coming under increasing scrutiny and criticism, and the depiction of the East-West uh, confrontation as one between good and evil, a crucial element for Hoover's exercise of power and influence, was becoming less and less tenable. More and more mainstream churchmen worried about a military code, war confrontation, and potential nuclear holocaust, and were receptive to some sort of accumulation between the United States and the Soviet Union. Within the United States, the impact of the civil rights movement and then the Vietnam War eroded the political culture based on the Manchurian anti communism of the early Cold War. Vietnam caused Nibbler himself to question whether the two superpowers were radically different and to wonder whether they had each revealed similar imperialist impulses. Nibbler would go on to become a founding member of clergy and laymen concerned about Vietnam, the CALCAV, and the history of this anti-war group illustrates what became of the FBI's tactics during the 1960s and the 1970s as more and more people became disenchanted with the religious Cold War ideology promulgated by Hoover, formed in the autumn of 1965 to support the right to protest the government conduct of Vietnam War, proclaimed dissent as a Christian tradition and declared to characterize every act of protest as communist inspired or uh, traitorous is to subvert the very so-called democracy which loyal Americans seek to protect. Now, in the Constitution, there's no such thing as a democracy. So, when we look into the whole genre of the FBI, the CIA, quote unquote, they drastically did things to subvert good hearted people into doing what they want them to do. For instance, JFK, that was an inside job, you know. And then, they'll say, oh, there's a lot of conspiracy theorists about that. Well, conspiracy or not, there's truth within it. And on top of that, they will subvert certain and do certain actions to get they just due because they are nothing but a warmongering machine that want to go around and bully people. So, they assassinated him because he didn't want to, warmonger and destroy the earth with nuclear weapons and stuff. You know what I mean? Which that's what any good, decent human being will do. But, you know, for each his own, we have a diabolical tranny government. And the chicken's about to come home to roost because we have to understand that if we, the people, don't take action within our own government and protest and take action, then innocent people are going to get murdered and die and destroyed because it's been a long time coming when Allah comes back within for his children, because people think it's a physical thing, but no, it's a spiritual thing to move the people to be coherent, okay? But, to each his own. For people who are spiritually inclined and that are practice spirituality and righteousness, I say peace be unto you. Now, let's get back into this. Okay, the FBI displayed little interest in CAW until the 1968 spring mobilization made opposition to the war impossible to ignore, despite the fact that its own surveillance revealed no evidence of communist affiliation or violent tendencies on the part of the CALCAV. The FBI placed the organization under Internal Security and Selective Service Act investigations in the latter part of 1968 on the familiar pretext that the movement was part of a communist conspiracy. See, and we know all that is hearsay, all that is um, really persecution and antagonizing decent people. And this is the tricks that they take on. Okay. Despite efforts by various intelligence agencies to weaken the peace movement, okay, to weaken the peace movement, they don't want peace. So why would you want to weaken the peace movement? Why? Because you're evil and you're money hungry and y'all are really the dictators that really want to be the ones that's over everything and you want to steal. And it's really, the source is right there in the pudding. Anybody who can, have, comprehension, will see this for what it is. So the weaken the peace movement, the CALCAV continued to grow. FBI interest in the organization intensified as well, though its views did not reflect the attitude of the majority of the church-going population. CAV leaders assumed that their phones were tapped and that they were being watched. Assistance provided by CAV to underground deserters violated federal laws, and Hoover ordered an investigation for sedation, although the inquiry found no evidence, and Hoover concealed V's nonviolent nature. The internal scrutiny and sedation investigations continued. The FBI surveillance of what were deemed radical Christians was intended to intimidate and deter those still prepared to adopt the tactics of civil disobedience, break the law, and accept the consequences in order to uh, dramatize and publicize the issues faced, the full brunt of the law, including imprisonment. So it wasn't no brunt law. N- All they're doing is agitating and inflicting their federal rule, okay, which is treasonous. Those are all protected constitutional rights. But they're sitting and stating right here that they're violating them on a daily basis. So they only, go with the Constitution when it's in their favor. But when it's in the citizens, American citizens' favor, they don't want to oblige it, acknowledge it. So what is that? So in their protest, they became fugitives to maximize the political symbolism of their cause. A massive FBI operation was implemented that involved surveilling and searching religious buildings and personnel. But the FBI manhunt for the Berrigan's ended as a public relations debacle for the Bureau. Dan Berrigan proved not only elusive but openly defiant, giving interviews and appearing on protest platforms, which prompted William F. Buckley, the conservative commentator, to mock the FBI for its impetude. If you needed an extra speaker at your peace rally, an extra interview on your talk show, or an extra drummer at your rock festival, you could find Father Berrigan without any trouble. But for some reason, the FBI could not find him at all. Hoover, always highly sensitive about adverse publicity and embarrassment, doubled already extensive efforts, helped by paid informants and the naive of Philip Bergen. The FBI eventually got their priests, and agents also recovered letters discussing a plan to make a citizen's arrest of a prominent public official who had contributed to the war effort. The discovery became a pretext for outlandish claims by Hoover before a Senate subcommittee in November 1970 when he sought millions of dollars in additional funding to combat a supposed antichrist group led by the Bergens. Now, antichrist. Now, those are all slander. That's slander on their persons. Propaganda. Um, Making them into something that they're not. All those tactics, you know, that's just plain out criminal. Okay, who he said were planning to kidnap a highly placed government official, as Hoover offered to substantialize evidence to support his allegations. However, he was pillared in the press, extravagating the adverse publicity he was usually so careful to avoid. The history of CALCAV shows that FBI practices and views did not change in this period, but it also reveals Hoover's declining ability to control public opinion, along with growing division and discontent within churches regarding their relationship with the state, resulting stiff on the part of mainstream churches. Yeah, uh, opened the door to the Christian right, which had far fewer qualms about U.S. foreign and domestic policies. However, that very split reveals the cracks in the religious Cold War alliance that Hoover had worked so hard to foster, as Heather Warren has congenially observed. By the late 1960s, incumbency Protestant consistent opposition to racism and war ironically made it a contributor to the dissolution of the national consensus that it had helped hold together for many years. Conclusion: It in times past, the the alliance between religion and state was the most effective means of social and political control of national populations. The two global wars in the first half of the 20th century demonstrated how, in wartime, very different and ostensibly secular regimes still invoke religion to support their causes. In the latter part of the 20th century, the Cold War also had a significant religious dimension because of the Western propaganda claim that the Soviet Union was bent on the eradication of all religion. It was a claim that caused concern among the leadership of the newly formed World Council of Churches, the institutional expression of the insurmountable movement, despite its impeccable anti-communist credentials, as the Cold War and American religious rhetoric both escalated. The General Secretary of the WCCWA, Visor T. Hoft, innumerable Christians, including Jeffrey Fisher, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and a WCC president, a president, with the stipulation that it not be quoted. The memorandum stressed that communist policies, contrary to the claims of Western propaganda, was not the eradication of churches, but their domestication. Communist regimes wanted not to get rid of their churches, but like their predecessors and their Western counterparts, if not to control, then at the very least to strongly influence them. All religious groups in the Soviet bloc confronted difficulties that included imprisonment, surveillance, censorship, and other means of oppression and in control. In the United States, only some religious organizations and individuals were subject to such measures. But the American political systems similarly used state power to monitor, control, and repress religiously motivated dissent. This process was one in which J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI played a crucial role, and it has had lasting effects, contributing to the declining influence of America's liberal mainstream churches and the rise of the Christian right. So they've been doing this for all the time that J. Edgar Hoover was alive. He passed away, so they still have some of those tactics. Um, that's why a lot of things is the way they are now. It had to be certain certain ways for things to come out the way they are. It's a cause and effect for everything. Okay, Morris, and my people, they gotta understand that you know put away all this classified information, then they make it into national security, and they hide it away from the people that they're supposed to be working for. So, are they really working for us, or are they working for themselves? That's the question. And all the people that's up under the guise as Americans, they hearing and doing not so patriotical things. Okay, they're not going by the guidelines of the treaties and the Constitution. Not doing that. They're doing what they want to do. So now we're going to talk about the apostles of deceit. Okay, ecumenism, fundamentalism, surveillance, and the contested loyalties of Protestant clergy during the Cold War. Michael J. McVicker. On March 26, 1947, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover testified before the House Committee on Un-American Activities, the HUAC, about proposed legislation to outlaw the Communist Party of the United States of America, CPUSA. Hoover, then 52 years old, had overseen the FBI and its predecessor organization, the Bureau of Investigation, for nearly 23 years. He came before the committee as a widely respected public figure. His bureau had battled organized crime during the Prohibition era and the Great Depression, protected the nation from sabotaging foreign spies in World War II, and vigilantly guarded the nation against communism and foreign subversion since the First World War. As an anti communist and guardian of the American way of life, Hoover stood beyond reproach in the popular imagination. He came to lecture the committee and therefore the nation about the threat, right, the CPUSA posed to the United States. So, threat, what type of threat these people oppose to the United States? Oh, because it's a corporation and they represent the United States of America, and they're only controlling certain aspects and telling people who they are and claiming to be the only Americans when everybody else around us are Americans, not them. So That's just like somebody like your stuff, and they get used to your stuff and they don't want to give it back to you. So either they plotting all type of ways to keep your stuff. This is what we got going on here. Um, Stephen J. Whitfield, a flair for um, sermonizing, the director delivered a fire and brimstone exoration of communist threat to the United States. Hoover testimony painting a stark picture of the battle between the United States and an international Soviet-led communist conspiracy. The implications were theological in nature and cosmic in scale. The great god of the American communist com- comrade, Lenin, whose writings are their Bible, and various speeches and writings urge the use of deceit and trickery, and his converts live by his injunction. Hoover warned communism be told the committee, in reality is not a political party, it is a way of life, an evil and malignant way of life. Average Americans, good natured, trusting and marked by Christian um, charitableness, like uh, hardly grasp the conspiral treachery they facet. So everybody else didn't know, all of this was facet as, you know, trickery, okay, prejudice, all the way to the far extent, keeping a class of people out and a certain people out because of their religious views. Okay, that is the biggest discrimination that you can ever put forth. And on top of that, that's how you treat the people who showed you love and brought you into your understandings. Hmm. So I do fear for the liberal and progressive who has been hoodwinked and duped into joining hands with the communists. I confess to a real apprehension so long as communists are able to secure ministers of the gospel to promote their evil work and espouse a cause that is alien to the religion of Christ and Judaism. I do fear so long as school boards and parents tolerate conditions whereby communists and fellow travelers, under the guise of academic freedom, can teach our youth a way of life that eventually will destroy the sanctity of the home, that undermines faith in God, that causes them to scorn respect for constitutional authority and sabotage our revered Constitution. Now, if you look at today's conditions, um, it seemed like he's the cause of everything. You know, the ones after Eisenhower, like they all the cause of it. You know, the Communist Party threatened to infiltrate America's great institutions, especially its churches, and chip away at America's faith in Judaic Christianity, and slowly replace it with the new gods of Lenin and the state. This chapter explores the interconnections between the FBI concern for the communist infiltration of the nation's churches and the development of a network of conservative fundamentalist groups whose leaders modeled their activities on the secret file collecting and investigating activities of the FBI to attack their foes in mainline Protestant denominations, dismissed, dismissed as cranks and rank opportunists and fringe uh, demagogues by their contemporary critics and many modern historians alike. These figures and the organizations they built must be viewed within the context of Hoover's warnings regarding the infiltration of churches by foreign communist agents. Hoover's calls for vigilance against foreign agents resonated with social, with socially and theologically conservative evangelicals and fundamentals. So theologically and theological. You know what I mean? He don't want that. He wanna restrain that. He wanna control that, and that's unconstitutional. You can't do that to people. You have to. You supposed to be upholding the Constitution, not diminishing the people's rights of the Constitution. See, his whole conduct is treasonous. But he was working for the corporation though to keep the corporation intact. Know what I mean? So the philosophical materialism and no, we're gonna look at this. Evangelical evangelicals and fundamentalists who saw modernizing or liberalizing theological trends in ecumenical American Protestant as extensions of philosophical materialism and atheist humani- humanitism. Humanism. No Protestant body reflected these ecumenical trends more clearly than the National Council of the Churches of Christ in the USA, and formerly known as the National Council of Churches, NCC, as the largest Protestant ecumenical body in the nation. The NCC comprised more than 140,000 churches, including Moorish American Orthodox Methodist, Presbyterian, and Lutheran congregations, with a membership of nearly 40 million Americans, pastored by 170, 107, 170,000 ministers. Popular anti-communist sentiments led by the FBI and average citizens to suspect that the NCC and Cumanism had red origins as the height of the controversy in the 1950s and early 1960s. The FBI, concerned about communist infiltration of the NCC, helped shape the development of a tiny network fundamentalist churches and ministers who attacked the NCC Goliath. This chapter shows how these fundamentalists appropriated the intelligence gathering activities of the FBI to create massive file systems designed to domesticate, track domestic religious actors in the United States and link the activities of theological liberals with agents of foreign subversion. So they had their way to operate, and they did this on a daily basis. So all day, every day, this is what these people was doing instead of keeping the country safe for real things, because nothing really happens like that unless the United States started. You see what I'm saying? Everything that happened, they started, and that that is not alleged. That is like facts. Like, we can go into newspaper articles. We could talk about um devastating things that happen right here on our home soil, homeland soil. So anybody that wanna um say, oh, where is God coming from? Where is man coming from? You know what I mean? Well, I'm coming from research and what's already has been put on the record. Now, Hoover's March 1947 testimony is now widely recognized as a turning point both in his career as a public figure and in the cultural history of the United States. During the Cold War, he built relationships with key members of HUAC, including freshman Californian California Representative Richard M. Nixon, and established a liaison with the committee to leak secret FBI information to congressional investigators. The direct testimony and subsequent relationship with the committee helped shape the Cold War at home by baptizing HUAC and numerous state investigative legislative committees with the authority of the FBI was domestic and international surveillance operations. Hoover brazenly challenged the Truman administration reluctance to endorse publicity the work of the committee and to confirm Hoover's narrative of a vast Soviet directed conspiracy to infiltrate America's civil and voluntary institutions. The director's testimony framed the struggle between the United States and the international um, communist conspiracy in cosmological terms. Communists were engaged in an apocalyptic battle to overthrow Christian civilization and enslave human beings to the state. And yet, for all of Hoover's rhetorical, rhetoric, uh, rhetorical flourishes, um, hyperbolic warnings, and unflinching support of HUAC, he also struck an ostensibly balanced position by denouncing the proposed legislation to outlaw the CPUSA and condemning the exercise of red baiters. These moves doomed the bill and solidified the perception that the Bureau and not elected officials should protect America from foreign communist threats. The director's testimony helped frame the way Americans, from elected officials and elite bureaucrats to average citizens, would think about the political, philosophical, and moral threat posed by communism. Besides these important cultural and political contributions, Hoover's testimony also had a profound effect on mid-century religion. His fleeing reference to communist efforts to secure ministers of the gospel to espouse a cause that is alien to the religion of Christ and Judaism rang out as a clarion tacit to thousands, perhaps millions of Americans. Since the beginning of the 20th century, socially and theologically conservative so-called white evangelical Protestants had worried about the influence of communism and socialism on American churches. With the development of fundamentalism as a social and theological project in the 1910s and 1920s, these concerns intensified until they reached a fever pitch following World War II. Hoover's testimony, writing, or otherwise further catalyzed an intense debate within American Protestantism about the loyalties of clergy, the power of the laity, and the place of the church in Cold War culture. A network of socially and theologically conservative evangelicals and fundamentalists mobilized to attack mainland Protestant churches. They argued that major ecumenical bodies such as the NCC represented an un-American and foreign form of religion. Alien forces. Hoover's warning to HUAC regarding the infiltration of churches and the dangers of naive clergy duped by sophisticated foreign agents prompt an FBI public relation blitz to American churches from the late 1940s, though the 19 I mean through the 1960s. Hoover and his agents delivered a consistent message that American clergy, whether Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, or even Mohammedan, must play a vital role in resisting communism. Now, look, now they even put Mohammedan. Now, now, well, Mohammedan is when you go into the Sharifian law, all right, which that's on the Moorish side. So when, because the Moorish Science Temple and all this came through at that time, and they was infiltrating them all at the same time. So he was doing everything that he can do to push back certain changes that it was, inedible. You see what I'm saying? So now must play a vital role in resisting communism by guarding against the infiltration of churches, um, seminaries, and Sunday schools by foreign ideologies. The public outreach concern with a broader push by the Bureau to link its public image with popular concerns about educating children and policing adults and maintaining the sanctity of the American family. In this cultural environment, clergy became simultaneously a check against communist sedation and figures of intense suspicion and even outright hostility because what he was saying is that he want to protect the so-called he want to protect the modern European so-called white family, and they'll do anything to protect that. See what I'm saying? He didn't care about Moors or he looked at us as servants and stuff when they are the servants and when they are the ones that's supposed to be serving us and protecting our country. See, the whole ideology of these people that have been in power for all this time have put a plight in our peace that we're supposed to be having here in this land, that we can be learning more and doing more as a nation instead of you know dumbing people down, because that was the whole inclusion. Okay, now simultaneously a check against communist sedation and figures of intense suspicion and even outright hostility. The Bureau's shift in public outreach coincided with what historian and Hoover biographical Richard Gere Powers has identified as an important turning point in FBI public relations from the late 1940s through the early 1960s. According to Powers, the Bureau shed its reliance on the G-man persona of its special agents. Now, agents transform from sleuthing gumshoes into moral paragons of family values, Christian virtue, and 100% Americanism. While these themes were already standard fare in the popular mythology about the FBI by the 1950s, they took on deeper significance as the Bureau sought to um, burnish its public identity through films, books, and journalism, as concerns about the threat of international communism mingled uneasily with domestic anxieties related to race crime and the breakdown of the nuclear family. The FBI stood as a guardian of domestic social order, and the special agent, memorial portrayed by humble everyman Jimmy Stewart and Warner Brothers. The FBI story, 1959, became a family man and an empathetic social worker who, according to Powers, radiated kindness and understanding rather than the Nor cop brawler of the 1930s or the Nazi chasing super spy of the 1940s. See, and Masters of Deceit, the book is they are the masters of deceit. Now they're trying to say that foreign enemies are the masters of deceit, and they was fighting against masters of deceit. But in actuality, they trying to call the kettle black, and they the pot, they black too. So we just got to keep it in that perspective. You know what I'm saying? Now, the best selling 1958 study of communism in the United States, Hoover illustrated these concerns with the tale of Jack, a young Midwesterner who left his family for college and lost his faith in God and religion. Hoover recounted how Jack, as a naive college student, found himself with an exceedingly curious mind, but one uncontrolled by any spiritual faith. Jack eventually read the Communist Manifesto and found his way into the CPUSA. In many instances, we know Hoover counseled readers joining the Communist Party come from a loss of faith, so to speak, in our Judaic Christian heritage, and earnest through perverted seeking for a new faith. An individual is trying to find solutions to problems real or fancied that disturbed his life. Hoover publicly proclaimed that he believed all forms of criminality and aberrant social behavior had their roots in the kind of crisis of faith experienced by Jack, who had unwittingly come under the foreign influence of circularism. See? Now, they putting everything on foreigners and all this, that, and the third so they can keep their positions. They don't want nobody thinking with their own mind and heart. They want to, indoctrinate you so you can come over on their side and look at things from their views. And if you start thinking outside of their views, now you become a problem. You become a dilemma. Years before, he recounted Jack's descent into communism. Hoover told a body of Methodist ministers sin and crime are matters of degree, but they stem from a common source, godliness or circularism. Since the country started with God and flourished with God's help, the rise in crime and godliness in the United States must therefore be explained. Hoover argued by the importation of some foreign philosophy. Here, the FBI director saw the work of communists. The danger of communism in America lies not in the fact that it is a political philosophy, but in the awesome fact that it is a materialistic religion inflaming in its adherents a destructive fanaticism. Communist is circularism on the march. It is the moral foe of Christianity. Either it will survive or Christianity will triumph, because in this land of ours, the two cannot live side by side. Now, see, why the two cannot live side by side? And this is what we get, okay, when we have other people's ruling and they take total advantage of a people that they put to sleep, okay, and this is what they're doing. They acting as slave masters to the liberator when they was the slave, and you know what I mean, before. That's just facts. And then all these other modern nations took on methodologies, okay, to explain their existence when they supposed to be paying homage to the Moors. Okay. That's why there's gonna be turmoil and there's gonna be a lot of things happening unless these people bow down and go back to their respective place, okay, and stop being heathens, stop being, a problem. They're trying to take and debo other people's lands that don't belong to you. Now, to drive home this point, the director and many of his agents promoted the conviction that Americans were uniquely religious people who had, through their civic and voluntary institutions, cultivated the spiritual side of the human creature. What? Now, who's the human creature? You understand? Like, they take man and make man the founder of civilization into mankind, which what they is, and switch out everything and try to have this ideology and don't want to put things in its right place. That's why things gonna go into turmoil, because they don't want to put things in the right place. They want to lie. And then our people take this indoctrination and run with it. And not just that, they are followers of it instead of being a leader and leading, because that's what you're here for. You're supposed to be leading, not be a follower. Now, to drive home this point, the director and many of his agents promoted the conviction that Americans were uniquely religious people. Okay? Right? Okay? Who had, through their civic and voluntarily institution, cultivated the spiritual side of the human creature. As literary Historian, right, Jason W. Stevens has pointed out, Hoover's emphasis on the essential spirituality of Americans assumed that the human being is structured so that he cannot rest without belief in something that will forgive his guilt, give him hope of continuality despite his fortitude, and restore meaning to a reality that appears fragmented to him. Hoover's conceptualization of the relationship between religion and communism echo traditional Christian theological themes related to guilt and the need for salvation. His spiritual view of the human creature placed him squarely in the company of many of his mid century peers, ranging from elite theologian, theologians such as Reynold Nibbard to such popular evangelists as Billy Graham. Hoover's deputies at the FBI publicized their boss' view of the inherently spiritual nature of the average American. For example, FBI Assistant Director William C. Sullivan couched his advice about resisting communism in the vinegar of the religious self-help rhetoric of the era. He advised Americans battling communism to start with oneself, engage regularly in self examination as a means of better understanding, developing, and applying daily the moral and religious values of our Judo Christian heritage. Sullivan assumed that God fearing Christian Americans were naturally resistant to communism, but the social values of of the social values of Christianity, such as charity and social justice, were especially vulnerable to communist subversion. Similarly, similarly, however, wrote similarly Hoover wrote that the danger of communism came from its uh, chicanery and deceit, and in the failure of Americans to understand the machinations, big-hearted but unrelative American Christians might inadvertently support communist ideas and groups because they failed to take the time to examine what the group's true objectives were. Education by virgin, vigilant churches leaders was essential to the self-examination prescribed by Sullivan and Hoover. Hoover most clearly explained the important role clergy played in battling communism in a series of articles published in the early 1960s. In Christianity Today, the flagship intellectual journal of American conservative evangel- evangelicalism, Hoover had a cordial relationship with Southern Baptist minister Billy Graham, undoubtedly the most influential and respected modern European so-called white evangelist of the era who founded Christianity Today to serve as a voice for conservative evangelicals who rejected the social separatism of fundamentalism for a more socially engaged brand of neo-evangelism. The cultures and the editors of Christianity Today gave Hoover a prominent place to hold forth on the theological implications of communism. Laud clergy and lay people alike for their efforts to resist communism and chide the naive and foolish who failed to recognize the threat of communism. In a 1960 Christianity Today article, Hoover used materialistic imagery drawn from modern warfare to describe communism. In a metaphor carried throughout the piece, Hoover warned readers of communist gunners who were citing an American clergy so they could launch um, atheistics missiles to, an angle cut and obliterate the spiritual tenets of life, belief in God, faith, and Judaic Christian values, love of the church. With echoes of Martin Luther, Hoover warned that communist attacks what the mighty fortress of God to undermine the spiritual firepower of the Christian church. Not into the nuclear fears of the period, Hoover argued that communists' ultimate weapon was atheism, which could destroy the Christian church. Behind all of the metaphorical bombast, the director developed his basic theme that American clergy were mostly loyal Americans who served as America's most formidable barriers against communism. As a consequence, any major communist infiltration in American churches must be explained as a product of foreign influences upon the clergy. To achieve this subtle subversion of the clergy, communists encouraged churchmen to endorse, support, and even participate in communist front groups, to sign communist sponsored petitions, to neutralize uh, critical opposition to communism. These tactics allowed communists to exploit Christian brother, brotherliness by encouraging hoodwink members of the clergy to inadvertently support causes detrimental to their flocks. So, hoodwink swindler, this is for you. Because that's what you call yourself, you hoodwinking and swindling people. What type of name that is? That's not being noble. That's being devious character, right? And to the contrary, well-informed clergy serve the important political and social function of reinforcing citizens' natural resistance to communism. Is smart clergy avoided unwittingly and naively supporting communist fronts because of their high-minded ideas. Then they could teach Americans the spiritual values necessary to combating the subterranean psychic influence of communism. Who was warning to the clergy reading Christianity Today and many other religious journals for which he and his agents wrote in the middle of the century, illustrate the FBI two basic assumptions regarding the relationship between religion and communism in the United States. First, the FBI viewed clergy as naive about the dangers of communism, though mostly loyal to the United States. Second, communist subversion of churches, despite the director's public rhetoric, was largely non existent. In fact, even by the Bureau's promiscuous standards of evidence, investigators found few indications of systematic communist infiltration of the church, group, or religious organization in a March 1960 review of investigations into the overall picture of the efforts of the Communist Party, United States of America, to infiltrate religious organizations in the United States. The authors concluded that the CPUSA has not been able to infiltrate our religious institution to the extent it exerts any control over their policies on a national scale. The report concluded that the CPS USA was successful in persuading ministers to lend their names to issues of interest to the party and by signing petitions. The careful wording on this point is significant, as the bulk of the accumulated evidence showed some ministers addressed issues of interest to the party, but the issues mostly related to social justice, economic equality, civil rights, and the end of blacklisting and legislative investigations of un-American activities were not communist issues per se, but issues that the ministers and the party supported for independent reasons. The Bureau concluded there is no indication of the CPUSA is uh, dictating the national policy of the NCC or other groups, even if some ministers had signed petitions the party supported. Since Hoover understood the CPUSA to be little more than a domestic organ of Soviet Russia, any self-conscious communist rhetoric in U.S. churches had to be of foreign origin. As historian Rodri Jeffries Jones has noted, this fit into Hoover's basic operating assumption that any form of political radicalism in the United States was alien and that aliens were behind radicalism, as Hoover wrote in the pages of Christianity Today. Now, they let this guy do this with impunity. And all the people that been running around here doing these things, they supposed to have been put to death for war crimes against the Aboriginal indigenous people here. Because mostly everything that they were doing, the FBI, CIA was doing was to, they said to protect the modern European so-called white American family, which they're not American citizens. They're not that. They're United States citizens that are foreigners that came here. And they had treaties with us for them to be here. But they disregard that. Now, here at home, alien forces strive to destroy the faith which forms the foundation of individual freedom. Now we talking. Now we talking. Now, why would you want to do that? That's like modern day slavery within the institution of the corporation, within the apparatus, because all of y'all are the ones who control it, and y'all supposed to be serving the people, and y'all not supposed to be tyrannical within your positions. But seemingly, that's what's been going on advertently within the so-called deep state. And then all these politicians, you don't know who to trust. So you have to go into research and you have to go into seeing what their track record is all about. Because really they de facto, really. Now, as spiritual creatures crying out for individual regeneration, Americans who lost religion might experience a profound sense of meaninglessness and adopt foreign philosophies meant to fill the void. The clergy could guard against such anguish, but only if they comprehended how communists use Christianity to undo itself. No, because Christianity within the religion, okay, if it was transferred from its purest form, okay, and brought into a dogmatic form, okay. Now, do you think that is sufficient? Yeah, for those people only. You can't push you can't push that on other people and indoctrinate them with those same principles that you indoctrinating your people. And then you have to teach your people too the certain aspects of history and who are the founders of it. Okay? No, y'all don't want to do that. Y'all want to make up your own history. Y'all want to make up your own ideology and have your own perspective on certain things that you know is not true. Now, we're going to go into a one world church. Now, by endorsing the position that foreign communists were trying to infiltrate America's churches and sway its clergy in suitable anti-American ways, the FBI waded into a long, simmering feud in American Protestantism since the end of the 19th century. America evangelicals had disagreed over the use of the church as an agent of social reform. In the late 19th century, modernists or liberal theologians argued that Christianity must come to terms with recent advances in science, including Darwin's theory of evolution. Now, there we go with Darwin theory of evolution. Now, they prophesied that to all the people like that was our story too. That's not our story. We're not troglodyte monkeys. We're not that. Okay? Now, that's what the whole Darwin theory is all about, and is their creed, not ours. Okay, and they want to push that and indoctrinate everybody with that, and then tell us that that's us. See what I'm saying? No, it's not. Now, and developments in biblical scholarship that undermine faith in the strict facility of Christianity scripture. Further, theological liberal clergy such as Washington Gladden and Walter Rauschenbusch offered a pragmatic philosophy of social reform that insisted the truth of the Christian project came in the form of progressive social activism. The philosophy came to be known as the social gospel. It downplayed evangelical rival in favor of collective social action, including church outreach, missionaries' activities, government regulation, and legislative reform that could further God's kingdom on earth by Christianizing the nation's social environment. In contrast to the theological modernists, fundamentalists not only insisted on the fundamentals of Christian orthodoxy, the inerrancy of Scripture, the divinity of Christ, um, so-called Jesus, Yeshua, virgin birth, and the reality of the miracles recounted in Scripture, but they also grew increasingly skeptical of progressive social reform. Over the first 2 decades of the 20th century, fundamentalists came to equate theological liberalism with social liberalism in the eyes of fundamentalists. Both positions seem to downplay Jesus, which we know as Yeshua, in favor of a um, collectivist, human entered philosophy. Fundamentalists cast a skeptical glance toward any teaching that portrayed sin as a social problem. Instead, fundamentalists insisted that political solutions to social problems must be subservient to individual religious regeneration. By the 1930s, many evangelicals and fundamentalists equated the social gospel with socialism, or worse, communism, and insisted on direct theological and physiological links between social progressivism, materialism, and atheism. Although many Christians remain loyal to their traditional denominations, the controversy led some lay people to view the clergy and bureaucrats who ran their churches with increasing suspicion. J. Edgar Hoover. Public warnings about communist infiltration of churches confirmed the deepest suspicions and cultural biases of many conservative, evangelical, and fundamentalist Protestants, foreign agents, and domestic ignoramus were undoing America's traditional Christian civilization. First fundamentalists and evangelicals found much to admire in Hoover's simplistic associations of theological liberalism with atheism, materialism, and ultimately communism. These themes had become commonplace assumptions in many conservative churches by the 1950s, and Hoover found ready allies in many Protestant pulpits preaching a similar message. Next, as conservative Presbyterian, Hoover linked traditional religion with the preservation of Christian civilization. Many Protestants influenced by Calvinism shared Hoover's worldview that anchored American civilization in its Christian foundation. Finally, Hoover's appeal to individual education and the the primacy of individual spirituality resonated with deeply integrated pietistic traditions that emphasize personal salvation and emphasize the power of centralized religious institutions in the lives of rank and like file Christians. However, Hoover's religious approach to fighting communism unleashed the restless energies of the critics of liberal mainline Protestantism over the course of the early 20th century. Theologically and socially conservative evangelicals had condemned the willingness of mainline denominations to set aside theological and doctrinal differences in order to cooperate on issues ranging from social reform to political lobbying. Most prominently, fundamentalists increasingly coupled theological conservatism with political conservatism as they came to identify the social gospel and Protestant and numerical cooperation as political expressions of modernist theology. By the 1920s, fundamentalists criticized efforts by other American Protestants to build inimical churches, organizations designed to highlight Christian unity and respond to modern social and cultural problems. They were especially critical of the Federal Council of Churches of, of the Churches of Christ in the USAFCC, and a numerical body formed in 1908 to represent the unity and social reform efforts of several denominations. By the end of World War I, the FCC had become nearly synonymous with the social gospel, modernist theology, and global Christian ecumenism. In the middle of the 20th century, the FCC evolved into the, com- the complementary body of the NCC and the World Council of Churches, WCC. The NCC claimed to represent the common faith in Jesus Christ, Yeshua, of nearly 40 million Americans. It did so by working in spite of the diversity of form and doctrine to make Christians and members denominations more aware of the central unity of their faith. So Hoover wanted to take his Jesus deity and keep the faith, to keep them rooted within their Christian Judic values, right? So he did everything to stop truth, block truth. You know what I mean? Because that's what he needed. Now, how red is the Federal Council of Churches? Read the facts inside and draw your own conclusions. Figures 5-1 pamphlets such as the Council of Christian Labor in 1948. So he didn't want to see the red. He didn't want to see all red, like the all red Russian flag or the all red China flag. You know what I mean? Because those still have connections to the Moors too. So, but you have to understand the uniting of Asia, which are the Moors, not the pale skinned nations, the ones that have been put in the background, okay, and have been ran amok by foreigners, okay, in their land. See what I'm saying? And they don't have, um, no unity within us as a whole. So the Prophet Noble Jew Ali instructed Moors to be in unity. Because if you with these five principles, you are in unity. As long as you are standing on your divine side and your national side, which is civic side. Okay? And all this oxymoron about sovereign citizen and all this, that, and the third, that's all propaganda. And if people still calling Moors black, you know what I mean, that's disrespectful. Would you call your mother a bitch in her face? No, you wouldn't. So don't call me black because I'm not that. I'm not a Negro, not colored. I'm not African American. I am a Moorish American Muslim national. Now, figure 5-1 pamphlets such as This Council of Christian Laymen, 1948 broadside titled How Red is the Federal Council of Churches provided mid-century critics of the FCC with ample evidence of the communistic learning of liberal Protestants and prompt many Americans to write the FBI regarding the council. Courtesy of Special Collections, University of Arkansas, Libraries, Fayetteville, Billy James, Hargis, Papers, MC number 1412, box 72, folder 17. Figure 5.2, Reverend Carl McEntry, founder of the American Council of Christian Churches, huddles with Major Edgar C. Bundy of the Church League of America during a September 29, 1970 news conference in Washington, D.C. AP Wire, photo by Bob Dorothy, courtesy of AP Images. These two guys right here. You see them? These two guys. They hard at work, sabotaging. Hard at work, guys, sabotaging. So, following World War II, fundamentalists and evangelists renewed their attacks on ecumenical Protestant bodies. They took issue with the NCC claim to represent different denominations in spite of their diversity. Instead of unity, fundamentalists insisted that the NCC's goal was bland religious homogeneity. Fundamentalists criticized the FCC, NCC, and WCC for glossing over theological differences and attempting to build a Babel-like superchurch that would impose theological and social ideas on American Protestants. On one end of the conservative spectrum stood the Presbyterian firebrand and radio broadcaster Reverend Carl McEntry. McEntry condemned the NCC as envisioning a one world church, a one world government, and one world race. Now, you hear that? They've been doing this one world order stuff for a long time. You know? Now, this program in McEntry mind was identical to the mission of communists and thus indicated that on some level the NCC and the CPUSA shared the same agenda. At the other end of the spectrum, more temperate Protestants associated with Billy Graham's neo evangelicalism and the National Association of Evangelicals similarly condemned the NCC, but also saw it as an important model for how conservative Christians could cooperate to have their voices heard in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. So they like how the setup was and how everybody's voices can be heard. But, you know, it's just how the certain things and the aspects of how things was running, you know. Um, we have to look at those things and analyze those things because the whole scope is to control people. It's not to give them a voice, like really, it's to control the narrative with the people that they put there in place. Okay, and then they spew all their propaganda and their rhetoric to convince others to be on their side to do what they want to do. So then when they go kill and murder innocent people, you know what I mean, you gave them the right to do so. Okay? The NCC commitment to ecumenical outreach, social justice, and radical and economic equality, along with its willingness to seek common ground between denominations on controversial theological issues such as evol- evolutionary theory and scriptural criticism created tensions between the professional clergy who administered NCC affiliated churches and the laity who composed the constituent bodies. Professional clergy often push issues and encourage social reforms out of step with many of their parishioners. This was especially true regarding desegregation and civil rights activism in the American South, matters on which the clergy were far more progressive than their flocks. Within NCC denominations, lay people form committees designed to monitor clergy, observe the bureaucratic work of the NCC, and generally push for more recognition of lay people's concerns. Dear Mr. Hoover, in this environment of heightened religious suspicion, Americans by the hundreds and thousands wrote Hoover and the FBI requesting information about this or that clergy member, organization, or petition. However, Hoover's numerous written statements and appearances before various congressional committees teased citizens with vague information drawn from the Bureau's seemingly boundless intelligence gathering apparatus. See, there we go. Apparatus. Many citizens assured that the FBI had information on their neighbors, clergy, and community leaders. Not only did many of the FBI's most patriotic correspondents view this intrusion of government surveillance into their daily lives as acceptable, but they also hoped that the Bureau would publicly reveal the most intimate secrets of their pastors and priests. So, first of all, these people are secretly violating your constitutional right by probing into your religious affairs. It's treason. Although perennial Navis concerns related to the influence of Jews and Catholics made up a significant portion of the inquiries about the communist infiltration of religion, by far the largest single set of letters dealt with Protestant institutions. In fact, correspondents aimed a significant amount of their requests at the NCC, while the correspondents' religious background is not evident in most of their letters. Many of the writers seeking information about the loyalties of NCC clergy made it clear that they accepted many aspects of evangelical and fundamentalist criticisms of ecumenical Protestantism and the social gospel. They associated both movements with communism and the threat of foreign influences. Letter after letter, most beginning Dear Mr. Hoover, poured into the FBI's Washington, D.C. headquarters and into field offices across the country. The inquirers took Hoover at his word, which he was a liar and cheating, treasonous human being. Like, he really messed this nation up and other people that was in the office, you know, after Kennedy. Okay. Yeah. So it's like y'all don't have nobody else after Kennedy except for, you know, what's going on. Yeah. So the file system of the Bureau metasized to manage the surge in inquiries driven by Hoover and his surrogates. Ceaseless warnings about the threat of communist infiltration of local churches and the CPUSA covert manipulation. Okay. Of Christian humanitarian impulses. Letters came from Americans of all social positions, classes, and religions regions, and enlisted man stationed at a U.S. Air Force base in California wrote Mr. Hoover about his big problem in regard to the translation of the Revised Standard Version of the Bible. The NCC oversaw the reversion of the American Standard Version of the Bible with a complete translation of the New and Old Testaments appearing in 1952. The RSV sold more than 26 million copies in its first year. But as Hoover correspondent illustrates, it also sparked concern about the political loyalties of the panel of translators involved in the project. What I would like to know, sir, the airman wrote, is whether or not there is any truth to a very strong rumor that a number of these people on the committee were ever or now communists or communist sympathizers or on communist front organization and organizer of the Minnesota United Church. Woman heard a radio news broadcast claiming the Council of Churches was infiltrated with communism. Kindly inform me, she requested, if this statement came from your department and to what extent the communists are working in this organization. A Methodist in Colorado whose church belonged to the NCC explained, I have heard several times of late that the National Council of Churches, or at least the head men in this organization, are pro communist. This prompted the writer to wonder just how much truth there is in the rumors. In another case, a correspondent informed Mr. Hoover, it has been brought to my attention that your department classified the Federal Council of Churches, the predecessors of the National Council of Churches, as subversive. I am writing to see if you will verify the accusation, regardless of the exact content of the letters or the nature of the information sought. Most of the writers shared a clear sense of concern for the loyalties of NCC leaders and betrayed a deep unease regarding the authority of clergy. Officially, the FBI responded to citizens' concern about the communist infiltration of religious groups with a mixture of tepid endorsement and benevolent concessions. Hoover disdained from letters, so the FBI offered a range of replies to citizens' queries that all delivered the same basic message. The FBI has noted your concern and appreciate your vigilance. But please understand that the FBI files are for its official, eternal use only. Over Hoover's signature, agents authored thousands of letters to citizens addressing concerns about communist infiltration of American civic institutions. In one representative letter to a citizen concerned about communist infiltration of this NCC, the Bureau responded, I have received your letter and appreciate your interest in writing. While I would like to be of assistance to you, I must advise that the jurisdiction and responsibility of the FBI do not extend to furnishing evaluations or comments concerning the character or integrity of individuals, publications, or organizations. Please do not infer in this connection either that we do or do not have in our files specific information you desire. I am, however, enclosing some material on the subject of communism which may be of interest to you. So he's not giving specific facts on information. He's proper scandalizing you with lies and deceit. That's what he's doing. And he keeping everybody in line, the whole modern Europeans. He keeping them all in line with modern and deceit. And he's keeping in line the so-called black people that are Moors. He's keeping them, everybody's in the church. So you got to control the church. You got to control the Moorish Science Temple. You got to control all the organizations around here trying to liberate themselves and live, within a constitutional fold. Okay. They don't want you to do that because they push this democracy, which is only afforded to them to control people. which this is the United States of American Republic. Okay? Now, the correspondent received a reprint of Hoover's speech, Communist Illusion and Democratic Reality. Really? Facade. Unofficially and concealed from the correspondent, the Bureau's vast invest, investigatory machinery meticulously processed every incoming piece of mail. Many correspondents would likely have been surprised to discover that the FBI first action was to investigate the letter writer, not the alleged communist sympathizer. For all incoming letters, agents searched bureau files for any reference to the correspondent. In the case of the previously cited letter seeking information about the NCC, research showed that bureau files made no reference to the correspondent. Agents then indexed the correspondent's name and cross referenced it against the Bureau's extensive NCC files. If the writer had already contacted the Bureau, researchers would then have typed notes summarizing any previous correspondence regarding the correspondent's concern about the NCC. The agent placed a note in the file reporting the National Council of Churches is currently a controversial organization and has been for some years. Given the specific information the correspondent desired regarding the NCC, it is unlikely that the short note regarding the confidentiality of the FBI files and the reprint of Hoover's vague comments regarding communist infiltration of local voluntarily societies satisfied the question. Okay, so we're going to look at all this stuff that been going on for a minute, and we have to understand more is that you know they've been running trickery all this time, and then they say they are about liberation and stuff like that, but for who? That's supposed to be equal on all sides. You cannot make a people into your chattel property, but you did. That's why two wrongs. You ever heard that saying, two wrongs don't make a right? So now you just have defaulted, your righteousness. So we have to look into that. Now, the Church League of America, the Bureau's cryptic and frequent admonition that correspondents should assume nothing about the content of its files undoubtedly encouraged many readers to conclude that the FBI did indeed possess the information in question and implied the director's wide discretion and capable handling of such sensitive information. Hoover recognized that much of the Bureau's public allure hinged on its ability to walk a tightrope between exposing too many of its secrets and revealing too few. Hoover embraced HUAC as the preliminary channel for releasing the information he thought Americans needed. He argued that the committee served its greatest contribution when it publicly reveals the diabolic machinations of sinister figures engaged in un American activities shortly after his March 1947 testimony before HUAC. When he first made this point, Hoover reiterated it in Newsweek as this committee fulfills its obligation of public disclosure of facts. It is worthy of the support of loyal, patriotic Americans, which he boasted, and they are lies. This committee has for its purpose the exposure of un American forces, and as such, its files contain voluminous information, which, when used with discretion, provide an excellent source of information. The FBI, unlike this committee, must of necessity kept the contents of its files confidential because they was doing a lot of fraud and they didn't want nobody to see what type of workings they were doing. So, especially you doing fraud, you don't want the right hand know what the left hand is doing. So that's the whole trick of the hand move. Now, as unusual, Hoover kept his own pronouncements about communist activities in the United States vague. When it came to religion, Hoover told Newsweek readers ministers of the gospel desecrate their faith when they describe themselves as Christian communists and call for the overthrow of the economic oligarchy. But he revealed no specifics about communist efforts to infiltrate the NCC or other groups. Federal law prevented the FBI from disclosing its file to average citizens seeking information about subversive activities. This prohibition, which Hoover aggressively defended, opened a space for enterprising individuals to fill the vacuum. The mid the mid-century period saw an explosion of anti-subversive groups seeking to bridge the information gap between the FBI's secret files and the clamor for information regarding communist infiltration of American institutions. Hoover's warnings about communism were not the sole factor driving the development of such groups. Most um, predominantly business interests with their deep pockets and friendly relationship with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies built their own intelligence gathering networks and developed their own subversive lists, which they happily shared with clients for a price. Harkening back to the 19th century union busting, anti communist, and anti Christ ethos of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency organizations such as the American Security Council, American Business Consultants, and Western Research Foundation operated private detective agencies that supplied subscribers with background information about potential employees who might have subversive learnings. These agencies often maintain ties with local police departments and federal law enforcement agencies, employed former law enforcement officials, and sold their files to nervous employers. Likewise, private voluntarily associations maintain similar file systems. Some, like the American Legion and Daughters of the American Revolution, maintain close connections to the FBI. So now y'all heard it. See, now y'all heard it. This is not what I'm saying or I'm pulling out of the air. Okay. This is documented. Okay. The American Legion of Daughters of the American Revolution. Right. Right. So let's read that over again. Detective agencies that supply subscribers with background information about potential employees who might have subversive learnings. These agencies often maintain ties with local police departments and federal law enforcement agencies, employed former law enforcement officials, and sold their files to nervous employers. Likewise, private voluntary associations maintain similar file systems. Some, like the American Legion and Daughters of the American Revolution, DAR, okay, maintain close connections to the FBI by sharing information and personnel with the Bureau. Other organizations such as the Ultra conservative John Birch Society attempted to burnish their reputations by recruiting former FBI agents and supporting the speaking and writing careers of former FBI informants operating at the fringes of these businesses and private groups. A network of religious organizations maintained their own subversive lists. Many of these groups were one person operations ran by ministers or lay people seeking to police this, right, or that denomination. Some ran tiny organizations out of garages or dens. Others had a national scope. Their leaders had direct connections to military intelligence and law enforcement, or they were former employees of the American Legion or similar organizations. Four of the largest religiously affiliated anti subversive operations, MG Loman's Circuit Riders Inc., Billy James Hargis, Christian Crusade, Major Edgar C. Bundy's Church League of America, and Vern Cobb's Council of Christian Laymen emerged from fundamentalist organizations supported by business, law enforcement, and religious interests in the wake of World War II. These groups fused the intelligence gathering, secrecy obsessed culture of the FBI with the populist anti elitism and anti intellectualism of 20th century fundamentalism into potent attack on mid-century mainline ecumenical Protestantism. Of the four prominent organizations mentioned above, the Church League of America, CLA, represented perhaps the most concentrated mid-century effort to collect and disseminate information about liberal religious organizations and their alleged connections to the international communist menace. Founded in 1937 by a group of Chicago area businesses and religious leaders, the CLA focused on exposing the threats of socialism and communism in American culture. In its early incarnation, under the leadership of advertising executive George Washington Robnet, the organization took on several right wing issues, including public education, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Supreme Court, packing scheme, New Deal labor policies, and interventionist foreign policy. As the CLA, see why y'all having interventionalists? Why you intervening on stuff? Why y'all have interventionist foreign policies? Because y'all don't want the Americans to hold y'all accountable for treason. As the CLA grew in national recognition, it focused on exposing the perceived theological and political liberalism of America's clergy. The NCC bore the brunt of this and of its wrath to gain authority in the already crowded field of mid-century anti-communists, right? Watchdog groups focused on religious issues. The Church League pursued an aggressive policy of information, collection and dissemination. When Robert, no, no, when Robnet passed most of the control of the CLAs to Major Edgar C. Bundy, a former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer and ordained Baptist minister. So that's Ted Bundy, y'all. Mm? What do they call him? Major Edgar C. Bundy, a former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer and ordained Baptist minister. The organization reimagined itself as a private intelligence gathering operation to gain public support for the CLA's uh, reinvigorated mission, Bunny's leveraged his own personal history as an intelligence officer and appealed to the widespread respect for the FBI domestic intelligence operations. In Apostles of Deceit, a scattering attack on the NCC and liberal clergy, Bunny informed his readers a citizen cannot go to a local FBI office or to Mr. Hoover's headquarters and ask for the names of all clergymen of the church groups which have aided the cause of communism and expect to get them. They are not available. However, this does not mean that they do not exist. He then proudly proclaimed that the CLA's dossiers on private American citizens and organizations were second only to the FBI's. He told audiences that the CLA's Wheaton, Illinois headquarters hosted in its research library the largest and the most comprehensive files on subversive activity and countless books, newsletters, and public lectures. Bundy definitely exploited the secrecy surrounding the FBI files to encourage lay people and business leaders to hire the league staff to research specific individuals or organizations in its massive index. For $10, a supporter could hire the services of our research staff, stenographers, etc., to run background checks on up to four individuals. Individuals above this four-person cap were priced at $5 a piece. So this is what they did. Talking about background checks and all this. So really, they're not really trying to see. They just want to see your affiliations and what you're gonna do. So with over 10 tons of documents on hand by 1967, the CLA operated a massive library of meticulously indexed private intelligence dossiers that subscribers could use for a fee. That was bulk of the CLA's data came from public sources, bookstores, newspapers, public government documents, the HUAC hearings, the letterheads of subversive organizations, and so on. More dramatically, however, Bunny told supporters that some files were smuggled out of the Soviet Union, the satellite states, and Red China. Bundy claimed that the League also operated a network of undercover operatives in the United States who sat in on communist and leftist meetings and brought out not only miniature tape recordings of the proceedings, but armloads of their literature, armed with tiny cameras. His agents photographed rallies, secret meetings, and student groups. His agents initiated themselves, no, no, integrated themselves with leftists that accepted their volunteer help to work in various headquarters. In short, Bundy claimed that he oversaw a vast secret network of spies and that he ran a multi-million-dollar private espionage firm out of a converted ranch house in suburban Illinois. So we got a lot of facts and history here, Morris. So now we got to understand figure 5.3. This updated promotional image of the Wheaton, Illinois based headquarters of Major Edgar C. Bunny's Church League of America was intended to highlight the vastness and orderliness of the Operations Research Library, courtesy of Special Collections, University of Arkansas Libraries, Fayetteville. Billy James Hargis Papers, MC number 1412, Box 75, Folder 26. Within the context of the era's paranoia, Bunny's aspirations were breathtakingly ambition and um, total totalitarian. In one pamphlet to donors, he outlined the CLA's research and hinted at his organization's aspirations toward total information control. The uniqueness of the Church League files is that every name of every person, organization, movement publication, or subject of significance has been put on a reference card with one incident per card, each referring back to the original documentation. Mm, okay. Full page ads in newspapers such as the New York Times calling for the abolition, no, the abolition of congressional investigating um, committees on or on attacking our security laws have sometimes carried names running into the thousands. Each one of these names has been carded and indexed with the reason for it appearing in the ad put on a card. Likewise, if an individual made a speech or wrote an article or book attacking and ridiculing a major doctrine of the Christian faith or the American way of life, that individual's name and the article or book were each carded. So anybody that had any type of radical speech, which they deem radical, what they deem radical. Okay. So I know they had um Martin Luther King Jr. on the surveillance. I know they had Malik El Haj Shabazz, Shabazz under surveillance, known as Malcolm X. You know what I mean? But the people that that's working for them, they don't have them under surveillance. Okay. They only have the people that's gonna do something under surveillance. Okay. So that's why I think a lot of our people are cowards and they don't want to stand up for nothing because they feel like they're gonna die or whatever. Yeah. So you rather just keep suffering and keep going through turmoil without standing up for your rights, even though you know these people are not telling you the truth, but you still want to just allow these people to take full advantage of you and just tell you who you are. Mm. Somebody needs to have some self evaluation and revelation. So, with more than 3 million cards indexed in thousands of individuals' organizations, right? And publications, the CLA could reveal connections between any number of subversive clergy and foreign agents through news and views, the National Layman's Digest, and numerous special reports, bulletins, and urgent fundraising letters. The CLA kept supporters supplied with a steady stream of material documenting communist infiltration of schools, governmental bodies, and churches. Although the organization financial records make it difficult to determine how many CLA supporters used its research services, right? Anecdotal evidence indicates that some individuals and organizations hired the CLA to look up suspected communists in its index system. Some of the most prominent figures to solicit CLA research services included fundamentalist church leaders from across the United States. Most notable, perhaps, was Bundy collaboration with Billy James Hargis and Carl McEntry. Hargis, a radio preacher whose Christian Crusade program once aired on 150 stations, relied on the church league's exposes for his broadcast. For his broadcast. He and his staff subscribed to News and Views. The digest surviving copies of these publications in Christian Crusades archives indicate that Hargis researchers relied on the CLA's material as an important source for the preacher's radio broadside condemning the NCC and other liberal Protestant organizations. Circulation of information from Bundy to Carl Mc, McEntry um, was even more extensive. In fact, McEntry relied on a network of anti-colonialism research organizations to build his own theological and political case against the NCC. Mid-entry, popular 20th century Reformation, our radio program aired on more than 500 stations. He also worked with a network of small fundamentalist churches through his American Council of Christian Churches, ACC. McEntry was a former minister in the Presbyterian Church, USA, who left the mainline denomination for a fundamentalist sect. In 1941, McEntry formed the ACCC as a small cross denominational body as opposed to an ecumenical council, committed to the principles of separatist fundamentalism and resistance to the ecumenical project of the FCC and its successor organization, the NCC. By the mid 1950s, entry ACCC had become one of the loudest voices attacking the NCC. Entry relied on the public disclosures of Bundy's CLAs to expose the alleged subversions of his leaders and generated considerable suspicion about the loyalties of his clergy. So, conclusion. The interlocking media output of the ministers of Bundy, Hargis, and McEntry drove a significant amount of the FBI's vast correspondence regarding the communist infiltration of the NCC and other mainline Protestant denominations as early as the mid 1950s. Eternal FBI documents conceded that nearly all of the derogatory information about the NCC comes from rival church groups. See? Rival church groups. So they'll make up anything to put on thy neighbor. But I thought in the good book it says honor thy neighbor. So so we gotta look at like the the whole thing like in its whole entirely, like the principles and morals of the people who are in control. And they're using religion to suffice their evil doings. Okay, now they up to a point now that they were renouncing all moral things and bringing in lewd acts and trying to force that on people. Okay, asking you all these um subversive questions. Okay, that's not, no, no, no. But when are people going to stop that? When are they going to stop the foolishness? Okay, because that's what it is. Now, the intense suspicion provoked by these and other groups eventually forced by Buell to respond. In 1961, Hoover tried to tamp down the controversy by telling readers of a popular Baptist publication that the vast majority of America's Protestant religious leaders are today doing a magnificent job. They are helping to preserve the dignity of man as the image of God and to mold the individual to be a worthy citizen in a democracy. See, all this is propaganda. All this democracy stuff is propaganda, and it's a advert of control of the nationals here in their own land. Because for you to be born into something that you didn't even consent to, I don't care if my mom's took me down there because her understanding and education, she thought she was being a United States citizen, which they didn't teach us real civics in school. They started taking that out within World War I and II and dumbed the people down and gave us a false history, a false context of things that wasn't even true. Okay, so 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 for people to try to come and debate people and try to make a mockery of people or try to make people seem like they're crazy. Okay? Because these people have intentionally, okay, put forth into all type of you know, advert and covert missions, you know, MK Ultra, mind control. Then you have another fraction of the CIA, okay, and all these people doing these clandestine operations, and nobody have an outside authority that's looking into them because United States say the United States Congress, but they have been stagnant. They have not done anything. You can look at the border crisis right now. You can look at that right now, and you can look at everything that's going on right now that is reverting back to what they already had planned 50 years ago. Okay? This New World Order, this UN, with these modern European nations, okay, that subvertedly, I mean, took away the United States of America Republic, okay, because it doesn't matter. United States of America Republic is still enforceable by those people who have treaties up under that because the treaties was amended to fit the United States adoption of the Constitution. So those remedies are still there. Those merits are still there. But these people are doing everything within the apparatus to stop, okay, aboriginals, Moors, Asiatics, indigenous peoples' rights, okay, to collectively, okay, be sovereign and run their own affairs without being molested by foreigners within their own space, within their own dominion. Okay? Now, when you take, okay, when you take rights from individuals by inducing them into fraud and teaching them, indoctrinating them into thinking that this is the case when in actuality it's not. Okay? So we have to be very, 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 very observative about certain issues and certain things that have been going on here. Okay? You have all these people that want to go take other people's land. They want to do all these things. They want to point the finger. But in actuality, about 5, 6 fingers is pointed right back at them. Maybe even 1,000. Because in this day and time, okay, Allah is not pleased, or your higher power is not pleased, or if you're an atheist, okay, or whatever situation you in, you know what I mean, or however you subscribe, you should know the difference between right and wrong. Everybody should have a moral compass. Okay, now America's Protestant religious leaders are today doing a magnificent job, right? They are helping to preserve the dignity of man as the image of God and mold the individual to be a worthy citizen in a democracy, which is all propaganda. Okay? Now, but the overwhelming majority of the clergymen are today wholly loyal to our nation and are working vehemently to protect our freedoms. which is, you know, who freedoms you trying to protect. The director asked Americans to avoid name calling and to resist the tendency to issue unfounded accusations or public seeking changes designed to confuse, divide, and weaken. See, they don't want you to have sympathy for so-called blacks. They don't want Europeans to be in allegiance with Moors. They don't want that. They want to keep things how they are, and they want to keep pushing their agenda, and they want to have a two-tier system here, which they've been operated with immunity. Okay, because our people won't wake up. Our people won't wake up. They won't wake up. And the ones that do know about this stuff, we're doing the best we can to put this information out. But then we gotta argue and debate with people. Where you get this from? Who you read this from? No, it's public information. Go do some research. Research issues. Whatever the thing is, um, we need to get more aware about certain situations. Because if you're not aware about certain things, you don't have nothing. You don't know you have rights. You can't exercise those rights. You don't have them. To further clarify main matters, Assistant Director William C. Sullivan drew the thankless core of addressing many of the wild charges circulated in the media among professional anti-communists. Sullivan, a Catholic, was the head of the Bureau's intelligence division and had long been engaged in monitoring communist activities in the religion field. So all these people that are working for the FBI, all right, are stopping, okay, stopping people from practicing their rights as Americans, true Americans, which they abuse, huh? Right? Which they abuse. So we have the so-called propaganda of the anti-communists, right? The Bureau's intelligence division and had long been engaged in monitoring communist activities in the religion field. He was a master at public relations. So his public relations was to slander other people, to push his agenda, and to weaken anybody um aspirations of them supporting anything other than their agenda. Okay. Now on a series of speaking tours, all right, Sullivan, a Catholic, was the head of the Bureau's intelligence division and had long been engaged in monitoring communist activities in the religion field. He was a master at public relations who spoke widely across the United States during the late 1950s and 60s on a number of issues, including the communist infiltration of domestic institutions. On a series of speaking tours, Sullivan, under Hoover's authorization, insisted that the vast majority of American clergies were loyal and that communists had not infiltrated organizations such as the NCC. See, he's trying to redirect everybody to the NCC. And not all other organizations is not good enough. Don't go there. Those other organizations because you'll be a communist, which is all propaganda, which is all is a ruse. It's all is a sham. Okay. Now, now, as he explained to a group of Methodist ministers in Dallas, Texas, in 1962, it can be stated factually and without um, equivation equivation that any allegation is false with holds that there has been and is on a national scale an extensive or substantial communist infiltration of the American clergy, in particular the Protestant clergy. The statement applies with equal force to the Methodists as it does to other religious denominations. Sullivan spent much of 1962 defending clergy and condemning the extremism of the far right. in an effort to rein in the rhetorical exercise of the previous decade. Not surprisingly, Sullivan's comments caused an uproar among the Bunnies, Hergeses, and the McIntries of the world, but it also did much to dispel public concerns about communist infiltration of the mainline organizations, and battle clergy across the United States embraced the FBI news endorsements of their loyalty. Simultaneously, the Bureau shifted its attention away from religion toward new homegrown issues related to the rise of the new left, the student movement, and the radicalization of the civil rights movement in the 1960s and 1970s. In this new era, much of the public obsession with the NCC likewise dissipated. Hoover's death in 1972 wrought a sea change in the FBI interest as its leaders shifted their focus toward reforming broken institutions plagued, plagued by serious personnel issues, allegations of mismanagement of internal files, and evidence of federal law enforcement agencies in terms of religion. By the mid 1970s, the FBI's new administrations or administrators largely abandoned the dated anti communist obsessions of the former director and turned their attention to other religious threats, cults, the influx of foreign relations, and radical white supremacy groups that rationalize their hate with theology. Meanwhile, the rise of the so called new religious right in the late 1970s deflated the anti communist fever that had powered the ministries of Bundy, Hargis, and McEntry. The formation of the moral majority and similar organizations stiffened funding and support away from the faltering CLA and like minded anti communist relics of the mid century period. Resources flowed to new organizations focused on social issues such as the breakdown of the American family, controversies over abortion, and campaigns to defeat the Equal Rights Amendment. In short, the religious right of the 1970s abandoned the FBI as a bureaucratic model and turned toward the mechanism of modern political parties, political action committee, and voters, guides replaced dossiers and subversive indexes in the fundamentalist war against liberal religion. Okay? So we have to look at everything within that charter of the lessons more is because when we look at certain things, we have to look at it for what they are. Okay? And most of the stuff that, you know, we 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 got to look at that things haven't been truly right. You know what I mean? So if anything, we have to understand that a lot of these people had went into certain things that they know that it's not really a understanding on the principles and what had went forth within the public issues. Now we finna get into um the Moorish Science Temple now, and we're gonna go into um the paradise of Islam, and we're gonna go into, hold on, let me find a chapter. Now, here you go, right here. Okay. Adaptations of the faith, unlike the social structure maintained within Islam's Islamicized religions, right? No common authority exists among Muslim groups in this city, nor in any other area of the U.S. Essentially, most Chicago Muslims share traditional values and follow the mainstream teachings of Islam. For them, Islam is a way of life that dictates both private and public behavior. Muslims often experience the communal aspects of their religion as part of one or more organizations that feature a distinctive theology and social system. Okay? For example, a Muslim may associate with the Muslim American Society, an organization whose supporters are primarily Moorish American and American born, and also be involved in activities organized by the Islamic Society or North America, ISNA, an advocacy group largely supported by Muslims who immigrated to this country within the last decade, as well as one of the numerous M, M, the MTSA, the MSTA, or Muslim Student Association emerging on the campus of local colleges and universities. Well, nah, it's the MSA. And that's the Muslim Student Association or Muslim Student Association emerging on the campuses of local colleges and universities rather than remain behind the closed doors of isolated enclaves. Muslims who numbers and stability could no longer be ignored at those of the 20th century have attained a new visibility. Islamic spiritual leaders are partnering with clergy from other religious traditions for dialogue and the development of interfaith community programs. In fact, when Muslims in Palos Heights ran into a roadblock in their attempt to purchase a church building and convert it into a mosque, support came from individuals and groups representing various faith traditions. Islamic private day and weekend schools have opened to serve both Muslim and non-Muslim families. Um, Muslims helped elect the late Harold Washington as the first Moorish American mayor of Chicago. So yeah, they Harold Washington they got so-called African American mayor of Chicago. Muslims demonstrated their ideological diversity in the 2000s presidential election, casting votes as Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. Moreover, institutions of higher education have created archives and research centers, added Muslim scholars and administrators to their facility and staff, and expanded their curriculum to accommodate highlighted interest in Islamic presence in North America. To contrast to persuasive political and social methodologies regarding gender relations in Islam, women comprise a significant segment of local Muslim communities and play an active role in the development, maintenance, and progress. Indeed, Muslim women are agents rather than subjects. Those who live experience is a vital uh, interpreting lens for the worldview of the men, women, and children with whom they interact every day. Muslims women in Chicago are temple leaders, stay at home moms, as well as educators, principals, photographers, entrepreneurs, real estate agents, therapists, attorneys, counselors, social workers, writers, publishers, administrators, and liaisons between their Muslim groups, other religious institutions, and the larger society. They direct international convention activities, edit um, periodicals, and yeah, periodicals, and create forums and support systems for new Muslim women as well as for immigrant women in whose traditional cultures women are not permitted to visibly exert influence or employ agency outside of the home. A number of Muslim women hold advanced degrees, including the terminal degree in their fields. As one female or one woman Muslim observed while shopping on Chicago's North Side, people take their cues about us from what they see on television or read in the paper. Such stereotypes camouflage who we are and the freedom we have in Islam. Without a doubt, Moorish American Muslims are the single largest Muslim group in the United States, representing at least 40% of the of the American Muslim population. Moreover, Islam has become an average in American religion, thanks in part of the overwhelming number of Moorish American adherents. Their decision to become Muslim has brought to the surface important linkages between Islam and identity, formation, self-affirmation, and um, determination. Locally, Moorish American Muslims freely associated with the estimated 100 Islamic centers and institutions in the Chicago area, nine still an overwhelming number, primarily support one of, of three predominantly Moorish American organizations with with established headquarters here. Two of these groups, the MSTA, Moorish Science Temple of America, and the original Nation of Islam, emerged in Chicago within 5 years of each other during the first 3 decades of, of the 20th century, which coincided with a dramatic increase in the city's Moor population. So, Moors were first started from the Moorish Science Temple, then the Nation of Islam countered it, and then they started calling you Black Asiatics. Um, the contemporary Nation of Islam was organized by 1977 collectively. They continue to offer their support distinctive Islamic identities as well as agendas designed to eliminate the negative images of so-called black people, strengthen the human family, and advocate self-determination. Through them, an increasing number of Moorish Americans and others today recognize the vitality and reality of a religion called Islam. In May of 1998, I became one of them. Now, now, we have to understand from this ideology, right? They say Dean Muhammad. Now, one personal journey to Islam. I was born in the racist atmosphere of 1950s. Now, this is his perspective, okay? Because he was born in 1950. Nobody told him about Noble Drew Ali. So you had the Nation of Islam, that was a part of the schism, okay? That now the prophet is no longer on the scene. Now everybody want to become the reincarnated prophet, and then they want to change the Moorish Science Temple into the Nation of Islam. All right. Now this is his perspective. This brother's here. Um, he was born in 1950 Chicago and raised in the multicultural environment of Los Angeles. His mother chose to send his four brothers and him to uh, Parashar Elementary School to fulfill the deathbed request of an older sister who was a devout Catholic. Following 28 years in which he worshiped and or served as an ordained minister within Baptist Pentecostal, which we already know. We just read about them, non-denominational, right, and United Methodist, right, traditions. He began an unconscious movement towards Islam. This transition and subsequent association with the Muslim American Society under the leadership of W. Dean Muhammad were not planned moves, but rather part of a journey that seemed to be a natural progression. His understanding of Islam and those said to be followers of the Prophet Muhammad pub were probably somewhat by media interpretations of Malcolm X Shabazz, which we know as Malik El Haj Shabazz, right? The characterizations of the Nation of Islam as a context for all Moorish American Muslims, which they say African American, right? It's just a slander of your nationality. And the Western tendency to confuse culture and tradition with religion in discussions about Muslims. In fact, prior to 1997, he had never met a Muslim, nor was he aware of the diversity within the Muslim Ummah or community, as he became, in the words of sociologist C. Eric Lincoln, one of the interior or belief, he began to realize the similarities in the basic tenets of Christianity and Islam, and to appreciate the Abrahamic heritage, heritage in the two faiths shared with Judaism. In the fall of 1995, he began a doctoral study at Northwestern University and Garrett Evangelical Theological Summary. The focus of his research was the practice of Islam and Christianity among Moorish Americans. Publicly, he was enjoying ministry in a local church as well as national and international preaching engagements, which both challenged and supported his personal spirituality and his development as an ordained clergywoman. Outwardly, he was convinced that the Christian faith was the only tradition that could nurture and empower him as an so-called African American who worshiped the God of creation. Internally, however, a growing sense of this equilibrium was emerging. Initially, he dressed in more modest attire around Muslim indifference in their religious teachings. He found the attitude of strangers rather interesting. For example, encountered to the street of tying, elevated trains seemed to be more polite and rushed to open doors. I must admit, he felt more respected and enjoyed the feeling. The decision to continue this mode of dress in Christian environments seemed to come naturally as well, replacing my form-fitting um, with clothes that drew less attention was less difficult than he imagined. He also felt compelled to attend the weekly congregational prayer services with families and were often followed by lengthy conversation over meals with Muslim women and their families and invitations to their homes. Becoming more deeply immersed in Islam activities, fasting during the month of Ramadan and making the five daily prayers. So in that in that aspect of being a Muslim, he was going into that initiation. So, like Salat and everything like that. But see, we Moors, we stand up and our philosophy is more Sufism, okay? And we deal with those principles more than anything. Now, America that always is attacking Moorish Americans. See what I'm saying? I just want to say I'm happy to be a Moorish American. Um, that my relatives have grown in their acceptance of being Moors and their understanding of my new faith. This is what he's saying. My mother and others often go on shopping sprees for scarves and other outfits to accent my wardrobe. So his family has begun to embrace his newfound religion because it's making him upright. His family's seeing the changes in him. So I'm gonna stop right there, Morris, and we're gonna come back to the Moorish Science Temple of America, which um we already discussed. So within those temples, you had clandestine infiltration. Some of the adherents were, um, let me see. You had the National Urban League. So this is all the affiliations within the Moorish Science Temple of America. Though the smallest in size of the three Moorish American groups, the Moorish Science Temple is the oldest among them. Now, this is what they're saying. The Moorish Science Temple is the oldest among them. So they was the founder of Islam. They're telling you right here, right? And among them, it was first organized as the Moorish Temple of Science in New Jersey in 1913, 2 years after the formation of the National Urban League and 4 years after the NAACP. So which one came first? The Moorish Science Temple. So why they got the NAACP? See, all those were cool after the fact because all those things was done to counter the Moorish Science Temple to make you back into black people. Okay, the prophet came. Okay, with the with with the assistance of Moors, he opened up the Moorish Science Temple so you can come back to claim who you are and not be labeled a United States citizen, which is treason. You're supposed to be a United States of America, United States of America, which makes you an American national. Okay, so what they did was put their markings on you, us as a people, through the Naturalization Act when they was forced to get nationalized. Okay, then they overtly stole your character and start calling themselves American and white, which they are not. And I keep expressing this because those are real truths. Those are real facts. So if these people keep telling you these false narratives. Then they keep talking about the Indians. Then they keep talking about um, you know, it doesn't matter what you call yourself. What you mean it doesn't matter what I call myself? It matters. It matters a lot. You can't call a dog a cat. That's not gonna. You can't do that. You can do it, but it's not gonna make it right, is it? No, it's not gonna make it right. It's not gonna negate the fact that that's still a damn dog. You call him a cat or whatever the situation is. So you depriving that and you subjugating that entity, that human being, and you making it into an entity. So within that culture, what is real? You know what I mean? What is real? Now, we have to look at a lot of things. Okay? And for example, you know what I mean, we're gonna go to the American um who made you by the holy prophet. Who made you? Allah. Who is Allah? Allah is the father of the universe. Can we see him? No. Okay. Where is the greatest place we can meet him? In the heart. Who is Noble Drew Ali? He is Allah's prophet. What is a prophet? A prophet is a thought of Allah manifested in the flesh. What is the duty of a prophet? To save a nation from the wrath of Allah. Who is the founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America? Noble Drew Ali. What year was the Moorish Science Temple of America founded? 1913 AD. Where? Newark, New Jersey. Where was the noble Drew Ali born? In the state of North Carolina, 1886. What is his nationality? Moorish American. What is your nationality? Moorish American. Why are we Moorish Americans? Because we are descendants of Moroccans and born in America. For what purpose was the Moorish Sign Symbol of America founded? For the uplifting of fallen humanity. How did the prophet begin to uplift Moorish Americans? By teaching them to be themselves. What is our religion? Islamism. Is that a new or is that the old time religion? It's the old time religion. What kind of a flag is the Moorish flag? It is a red flag with a five pointed star. Five pointed star. Okay? And it is a red flag with a five-pointed green star in the center. What do the 5 points represent? Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. How old is our flag? It is over 10,000 years old, which is our holy day, Friday. Why? Because Friday is the day on which man was formed in flesh, and it was on a Friday when he departed out of flesh. Who was Jesus? He was a prophet of Allah. What is Jesus' name? Yeshua. Where he was born, the house of, where he was born in Bethlehem of Judah in the house of David. Who were his father and mother? Joseph and Mary. Will you give in brief the line genealogy through which Jesus came? Yeshua. Some of the great fathers through which Yeshua came are Abraham, Boaz, by Ruth, Jesse, King David, Solomon, Hezekiah, and Joseph by Mary. Why did Allah and why did Allah send Jesus to this earth? To save the Israelites from the iron hand oppression of the pale skinned nations of Europe who were governing a portion of Palestine at that time. Now, who's trying to take over Palestine right now? Hmm? The Israels, right? The so-called Israelites, they're not the Israelites. We are. The modern pale-skinned nations are not Israelites. They're not the so-called Jews. They are converts. They're not the real people. Okay? How long has that been? About 2,000 years ago. So in 2,000 years is 2024. The prophet is the the prophet is the prophet is true and exact what his prophecies is, and he's teaching you for what in this day and time, what for the young and unborn. Okay? Now, how long has that been? We already read that. What was the nationality of Ruth? Ruth was a Moabitess. Okay? What is the modern name for Moabites? Moroccans. So, not the kingdom over there. We are the empire over here. We are the mothers and fathers over here of civilizations over here. We are those Barbary Asiatics, those Barbary pirates, those Moors. Yeah, we are them. So, why did Allah send Jesus to this earth? To save the Israelites from the iron hand oppression of the pale skinned nations of Europe who were governing a portion of Palestine at that time. So the prophet came back, and that's why we honor all prophets. Confucius, Buddha, Yeshua, which is Jesus, and Muhammad. Okay? So, where is the Moroccan Empire? Northwest of Maxim. What is the modern name for Amexem? Africa. What is the title given to our ruler in Morocco? Sultan. Where do we get the name Jesus? From the East. So, Morse. Okay? I just want you all to, think, critically think, and do some research because we have to understand that it's people out here that don't want us to get this knowledge. They don't want us to get this knowledge. So, for us to get this knowledge, we have to be studious, we have to be upright, pure, and clean. So, just know that, Morris. And I want y'all to understand that, you know, we have a lot of work and Allah is guiding us through it, and we shall be liberated. And I leave you guys with love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. I am Menelik Allah Ar-Rahim El Bey, as known as Menelik Allah Ar-Rahim Brown L. I'm going to sign off tonight, and I hope this message get to those Moors that are faithful and that are going to do something about their state and the situation that our people are plagued in. Um, I want to give honors to all the nobles out there, Islam, and I yield the floor with that, Moors. Peace, love, and light.